Oh, good morning. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Kai. Yes, I was learning the words to Zig Zig Ah on the train on the way up here. I could sing that to you if you wanted, or maybe not. It's very nice to be here. It's very frightening to have such a huge face of mine behind me, particularly because I put my makeup on at 5 o'clock this morning. So if the cameraman could put a nice lens on that for me, that would be really appreciated. Right, so I'm here to talk about barriers to learning and to talk about technology and learning. And the first thing I want to say is that I've brought an offensive weapon onto the stage with me. I wonder if any of you saw me bring it on and know what I'm talking about. Anybody have an idea? It's my phone, yes. You know this is an offensive weapon? And I was reading in the newspaper on the weekend that teachers can frisk, the word was frisk, students for mobile phones. So I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to challenge the notion that this is an offensive weapon, and I'm going to suggest that unless teachers, educators, policymakers, all of us who work with children and young people embrace the way kids are using technology, we might as well give up, go home and close our schools. Okay, so it was really interesting listening to Minister for Schools and I thought very helpful presentation of the white paper. Particularly interested in the aspect that we now want to have 35% of pupils in all schools achieving 5 A stars to C GCSEs, including in English and Maths, as a target. So what I want to do is present some evidence to the Minister, to you all, and we'll be presenting this evidence to Secretary of State Michael Gove on the 16th of December when he's asked me to meet him and to advise him on how schools can use technology and whether schools should be using technology. I did the Byron Review in 2008. It was commissioned by the last government, and I was asked to look at the way children engage both online and in video games, and to look at what was called harmful and inappropriate content. So I wasn't looking at illegal content, I was looking at harmful and inappropriate content. And what really fascinated me about doing this review was the incredible amount of moral panic that exists when we start talking about the way kids use technology. Now, just to help you understand what I mean by the phrase moral panic, when the printing press was first invented, there was a huge moral panic, particularly the church were freaking out that anybody was able to get their thoughts printed and widely disseminated, that anybody could share their ideas with anybody else, the democratization of thinking and sharing those thoughts. There was a moral panic in the 1920s when the film industry began to really grow and people started to enjoy watching films. In the 1950s, there was a moral panic in the States about comic books. I think it was something to do with them illicitly spreading communism. Allegedly, I learned as I researched this that the invention of the sofa created some deal of moral panic. Apparently it was going to lead to young people lazing around and not engaging in very much that is constructive. Not at all. Interestingly, the phone, there was a debate about whether women should be regulated in the amount of time they could use a telephone, because it would compromise our ability to mother and to look after our homes and our husbands. You see, they're offensive weapons. Anyway, we now have a moral panic around technology. We definitely have a moral panic around video games. And so one of the things that I had to spend an awful lot of time doing in my government review was to try and calm everybody down. And that included explaining to people that, no, I can't suggest that the UK doesn't have the internet anymore. And actually, no, it's not possible to put a sort of a watershed on the internet. So after 9 p.m., only can bad things be seen on the internet, because obviously it's global and time zones are different wherever you are and wherever you're creating that content or taking that content from. So the moral panic was one of the big issues, and it still exists. And I think when I read headlines that say that teachers can frisk for mobile phones, I think there is still a panic. Also, which is obvious, we have a very stark digital generational divide. Some of you will have heard the phrase which calls children digital natives, and those of you who are about as old as me or older digital immigrants. And I think this is a very useful characterisation of how we need to think very carefully about what we pronounce as being helpful and useful for children when it comes to technology, because actually what we're doing the thinking about and the pronouncing about is actually an area that children know significantly more about than we do. And I think that causes real tension and conflicts for adults in all sorts of ways. When I talk to my kids, I was talking to my kids last night actually about today, and talking about this notion of digital citizenship. They look at me as if I'm an idiot. And they sort of, my son particularly, my youngest Jack, said, "Mummy, you know, what's digital citizenship, what does that mean?" I said, "Well, Jack, what it means is," and he said, no, I know what you think it means. He said, "Look, Mum, it isn't about being a digital citizen, it's a citizen, okay? Digital, online, offline, it's our world." And I think even the language we use shows the difference we have in our understanding and our acceptance of the way children are using technology. And fundamentally, the way that we think about the way children use technology comes down to issues around safety, which of course is important, but these are the overriding issues that I believe fuel the moral panic. And certainly the work that I do, and where the UK Council for Child Internet Safety now sits, which was set up by the Prime Minister after my review, where all the policy and the thinking is done about this kind of issue, is done within the Department for Education, within the section which is to do with safeguarding. And again, I'm really asking you to think about language, safeguarding. It has such a risk-averse feel to it that, again, it's all about fear, it's all about shutting down, it's all about closing off. Now, when we got to publish the review, I was very lucky. The review was widely accepted, and all my recommendations were accepted by government, and actually many of them have been delivered on. And what I broadly recommended was the UK Council for Child Internet Safety bringing together key stakeholders in how we understand the way kids use technology, particularly also bringing education stakeholders into that dialogue. Also industry demonstrating the way they are going to be much more transparent about the sort of measures they take to help children and empower children and parents and teachers to be safe online, so that the opportunities and the benefits of the online space can be exploited. And we need to. We are in a global recession. We need strong digital members of our workforce because we are now digital economies. And if we're not enabling our children to develop these skills, and you talk to any key business leaders who are very concerned about the lack of the skills that children are coming out of school with, the relevance to business, then I think we are setting ourselves up for failure. There was a lot of work I did looking at also the use of technology in schools, and what really shocked me was how variable that piece is. There are some schools with very innovative school leaders and school workforces where technology is used in an extraordinary way, and there are others where it isn't used hardly at all. Now, I think let's just kind of set a context here. Children and young people spend most of their time engaged with technology, whether it be for communication, play, or learning. Much of that time, we find from surveys and evidence, is used to support that learning. So often when they are at home, if they're online, it's often to do homework, even if it's not directed particularly by the teacher. They will use it for their homework, and as many of you in the audience know, there are some who use it to cut and paste and to plagiarise and to not think about reliability of source and to take the first thing they find on the first page. Wikipedia, usually. Wikipedia, who I think for a few weeks had Tony Blair's middle name as Duke. Did anybody remember that? Somebody put it up to see if anyone would notice. No one noticed. Poor Tony Blair. Anyway, so kids are using technology quite substantially, but somehow when it comes to school, many schools fear the use of children and technology. Many schools have very highly managed systems. Open source learning is not necessarily encouraged, and mobile phones are seen as bad things. And they can be bad things. They can be used to disrupt and distract, but surely rather than outlawing them, we need to engage children in thinking about how they can be used to support their learning and create a culture of responsibility within these children and young people, within the classrooms, for how they use technology sensibly and appropriately. Now, technology is changing rapidly, and what that means is children are having constant access to information, resources, and knowledge networks. We need to enable them to keep up with that. And what children are doing is they're bringing the expectation, they're bringing what they're getting from their engagement with technology into the classroom. And they are looking to use the technology to learn. And I suppose what I find the most depressing of all is when you have something that kids generally are really enthusiastic and motivated by, for example, video gaming. Why, if we were to start to think about using video gaming in schools, would most people think it was a terrible thing to do? I can't quite see where the mismatch is there. How do we understand the role that technology has played in schools? And do we know how technology can be used to build learning-orientated behaviours? Now, actually, there is a strong body of evidence linking the use of technology to improvements in meaning and in outcome for learners. I could stand here and spout loads of studies. I mean, fundamentally, what I need to say to you is schools that show e-maturity, these schools can show within a 12-month period an increase by 2 grades with the outcomes of their students. So that is the difference between a C and an A. Technology can be used not just to help children achieve better outcomes in their learning, but to inspire their learning and to inspire them creatively to think about their learning and to engage with learning in a way that is relevant to them. And I think relevance is a really important point here as well. Obviously, it didn't help when Obama in May this year said in a speech to students at Hampton University, with iPods and iPads and Xboxes and PlayStations, none of which I know how to work, information becomes a distraction, a diversion, a form of entertainment rather than a tool of empowerment. Now, I understand that he's actually gone and sort of slightly changed his opinion on that, but it was really interesting to me that Barack Obama, who really, if it wasn't for technology, maybe he wouldn't have won the election as well as he did. He used technology very well. His team did during his presidential campaign. Should be so negative about these ways in which these multiple platforms that children are not only consuming content, but they are creating content as well. We need to think about how we have digitally literate children. We need to think about how we enable kids to use technology competently, how they can understand and interpret digital content and assess its credibility, issues like reliability of source. How can we enable and inspire our children and young people to use tools for learning around creation, research, and communication? Now, by the way, here's the headline: teachers can frisk pupil for phones, just so that you know I didn't make it up. There you go, frisk. There you go, just so you know. No one frisked me before I came on stage. I was having a nice chat with Nigel over there, who's a very nice man. He didn't frisk me. We just said he wanted to. How nice. Nigel, I'm married. Okay. But thanks anyway, don't often get offers like that. Right, let me just tell you a few things here, and I just want to say a big thank you to Andy Goff, who's in the audience. I don't know where he is. You should meet Andy Goff. He worked, ConnectEd is his business. He now has the interactive learning experience. Andy works a lot with industry, particularly the gaming industry, to look at which ways in which gaming can be used within schools. He's given me some really great examples. As a primary school, Kirklisson Primary School, they were given a set of PSPs. Do you know what PSPs are? PlayStation Portable. Yes? Okay. They were given a set of PSPs, and there was a package on the PSPs, an interactive package called Sums Maths. And what they found was that they had significantly increased results for the children at the end of this particular pilot that they did, particularly the hard-to-engage children, particularly the hard-to-engage boys who had never shown an interest in maths really at all. So not only were they seeing an increase in results, but they were also seeing an increase in engagement. The kids were coming into the lesson saying, oh, I was really looking forward to this lesson. This is good fun. We have evidence, beautiful evidence, from a school, Saw Valley College, with older young kids, and looking at design and technology. A wonderful sequence where kids are learning about the solar system. Do you know what these are, by the way? Do you know what that is? It's a QR code, congratulations. It's a QR code, it's a quick response code. So this is actually my QR code. Jack, 12 years old, last night, while he was downloading an album on iTunes, he made this for me. If you scan this, you will get information about how you can connect to me, how you can find out my email address and la. So I'll leave it here if anyone wants to have any kind of relationship with me, not you, Nigel. You can scan it and use it to have a dialogue with me. So these QR codes, they're great. So basically you can make one in seconds. But what this particular school did, they were doing some work around the solar system and they built 3D models of the planets. They then created a way that those 3D models, the data around those models could be put into a QR code. Then the kids came in with their I think they were using PSPs, but you can use a phone, you can use anything, a smartphone, and by putting your scanning over the QR code like that, suddenly the planets were revolving around these kids in the room. It's absolutely brilliant. These are kids who, again, often were hard to reach, and the reports from schools that do these pilots and other reports, Bechter reports, rest in peace, Bechter, but Bechter reports around the use of technology in schools shows that also you get an increase in attendance. So what do we need to do? Well, I think we need to just chill out, grow up and settle down. I think we need to remove our risk-based thinking. We have children who are raised in captivity in this country. You barely see a free-range child on the streets these days. When you do, you just want to take it home and fatten it up for Christmas. Children are raised in a risk-averse culture. We do not allow our children outdoors because of an overblown paranoia that they will be snatched and worse. So where are children doing their childhood? They're doing it online. They're doing it online, and we're not thinking about how we can enable them to do it, not just safely, but also in a way that's really going to enhance their thinking, their learning, their being, and their development. I'm not suggesting that technology is the answer to everything, but I am suggesting if you have a group of kids that you're struggling to engage, think about some very simple ways you can engage them with the technology that they possess. You don't even need to go out and buy loads of new technology. Gaming is used by the medical profession, gaming to train surgeons. Gaming is used by businesses to train people. Gaming is not used by schools. Why do we have such a problem? As my daughter actually said to me yesterday, she said, maybe you guys just don't like us having fun when we learn, because when you went, it was really boring. And she speaks like that too, you know, like, oh my God, I mean, not another lecture about technology. Ugh. In fact, interestingly, she and her friend said the only time when things will really change is when you all die and we can take over. Okay? And you just think, yeah, great, thanks for that. Shut up and eat your supper and turn off the telly. Right, look, I've got so many interesting things to say to you, but you've got Daniel Pink coming on. Really exciting. I met Daniel Pink. I've always been a bit of a fan of his. So I will hurry up and say, look, technology is not the answer to all of school's problems with student learning and achievement, but there is an evidence base. And from now on, for those scaremongers who want to go around saying, frisk 'em, offensive weapons, and all the things that we're reading, provide the evidence and then we'll listen to you. But if there's no evidence, shut up, okay? Because it's not helpful. And actually, when you look at the statistics around children with learning difficulties who are able to communicate and learn, children with autism, children I see in my clinical practice with Asperger's, children who struggle to communicate, you give them technology, you are enabling them to be, to learn, to communicate. Kids who are dyslexic, who have tracking problems, they will learn to read through gaming due to the hypertextuality and the way that these features are presented to them. We don't want kids in front of screens all the time. We don't want to replace books. We want kids to be able to write, but we also want kids to love learning, and the way they will love learning is if we make their learning relevant to them. So technology can promote kids to set themselves new learning goals, tons of evidence on that, can enable teachers to implement new teaching strategies around teaching strategies that are relevant and student-centred, that are collaborative, that are engaging, that are self-directed, but most importantly, that are authentic. And what we know, and we're beginning to see this more and more with research, and I commissioned a piece of research for my review from the University of Cambridge, at a neuronal level, we are seeing the development of higher order skills with children who use technology to support their learning. I hope I've inspired you. If you don't understand it, go and ask the kids. Set up a digital council. Let's stop being so top-down. They are our future. Let's get them to advise us on the best way we can help prepare them to be the best they can for their future, which fundamentally will be our future as well. Thank you very much.